Okay. Hello again. Welcome to my painting channel. I'm Larry Hamilton. Thanks for watching. Today we're going to do another in a series of exercises that are part of the watercolor workshop I'm teaching later this month in July. And we're doing a rose today. And you caught me sketching just a few bits of it. Actually, I was tracing the rose from a piece of tracing paper, as you might see here. Underneath the tracing paper, I have some carbon tracing paper that's used to actually transfer the rose image to the watercolor paper. So what I'm going to do now that I have it traced, I think it looks pretty good here. Make sure I'm not missing anything. That's pretty good. That's all I want. So I'm going to take off the tracing paper and the transfer graphite paper, and I have left an image of the rose. Hopefully you can see that. That's what we're going to paint today, and I'm going to use some techniques that I've learned from an artist in the United Kingdom named Jeremy Ford, and we will proceed with this. I want to make sure that it's viewable. It's a little light, but I'm going to sketch this or paint this on 9x12 cold press watercolor paper, which is what we're using in our class. And I'm going to use the same paints that we've talked about before. I'm going to use the same brushes that we've talked about. Hopefully you know what those are, and I don't have to go over those again. If you don't know what they are, you can look at the previous watercolor workshop video on YouTube that talks about the brushes. Basically, I have 7 brushes and about 16 paints, and they're shown on the palette here. And I want to get going with this. So this is painted wet on dry pretty much, except for the background, but we do the background last. So to start this out, I'm going to start with my number 8 round brush. This will be done almost entirely with the round brush. And I'm going to get my red colors. I have 3 reds, Carmine Hue, which is a Grumbacher Academy paint. All of my paints here are Grumbacher Academy paints, student grade Academy paints. I have a Grumbacher Red, which has some orange in it, similar to a cadmium red. And I have an alizarin Crimson by Grumbacher. So you see the 3 reds here in the palette, and I'm going to use mixtures of those 3, and I'll put a little yellow in there later to make a little bit of an orange. But primarily this is, the rose is the center of interest. I have this paper mounted in portrait form, which means it's 9.5 inches this way and 12 inches vertically. And so let's get started with this. We're going to start with some of this Cad Red or Grumbacher Red. We're going to start inside this rose. We're going to leave a little border out here for the edge, for the tips of the rose. So we have some highlights out here, but I'm just going to paint along inside this edge. Hopefully you can see how close I'm coming here. I'm not painting right over that pencil line. And using the mixture of reds here, I'm going to paint right down toward the top of a second petal in here. And we will just go around and paint this inside of this rose like this, changing the color, mixing from the pinkish color of Carmine Hue to the darker reds, which is the red with orange in it, which is the Grumbacher Red. Also, alizarin is a darker red, has more purple in it. So we're having a mixture of reds with orange in them and reds with purple in them. And Carmine Hue is sort of the middle color. So hopefully you're able to see this well. I could zoom in a little more maybe and let you take a little closer look here. what's going on. So the idea is to really paint the inside of the petal here, and then we'll darken the bottom of this a little bit as we go around. But we want to make sure we leave some edges here that are highlights, the tips. And we'll make it dark. We'll put some shadows in here in a little bit, but we want to make it sort of blend out to the top of the petals. Over here, let's see, we got some over here. We'll put in some of this carmine hue on here, touch it to the petal underneath it, leave a little bit of a space on top, come back and darken just a little in here. So this is what dry paper, wet paint, wet on dry is the term. A lot of times we paint wet on wet. But this particular painting, we want to try wet on dry. If I stop talking, it's usually because I'm thinking and trying to be creative. Part of the problem with painting and talking is that one's a left brain activity, one's a right brain activity. You need the right brain to do the artistic components, but you need the left brain to think and talk and describe what you're doing. So these paintings on YouTube require both. Also notice that I'm painting in a vertical format, which is natural for me here, common for me, because I basically don't have overhead cameras, and it makes it a lot easier to video this, as well as videoing the palette here that you can see the colors. Some artists have their videos done in studios that cost a lot of money. My studio is my art studio, and still costs some money to put the equipment together, but it's nothing like paying a full-blown studio production staff to video your paintings. And that's one reason why I can offer these really at no charge on YouTube, so you can see them. So let's see. Okay, we're going to put a little of, pick up a little of this yellow here, get a little orange going for part of this. Down here, some areas. These. And we'll darken this a little bit, but basically the idea is to get this laid in with as much accuracy as you can. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to, these things need to resemble petals in a rose. And hopefully it's starting to look a little bit like that. The inside has more red, so I'm going to go back and get some alizarin. I'm still using this number 8 round. I'm going to darken some of these areas under some of these petals. Right in here, might be a little darker. Could be a shadow of one petal falling on another one. And it starts giving some more definition to these petals here. Just 3 colors of red. And while it's still a little bit wet, they still tend to blend a little bit. Okay. Down here. Okay, I think we'll stop on this part of it for right now. Just let that rest for a while. Start putting in a little bit of the background. Okay, so well, while this is drying off a little bit, we're going to go back and make some other colors. We're going to use I want to get some grays and some blues, so I'm going to use ultramarine blue. Make myself a small puddle of ultramarine blue. And to gray that down, if you listen to any of my other videos, you might know what we use to grade that blue down. But one nice color to get a pretty color is burnt sienna. So we take a little burnt sienna and stick it over here, and this will gray down this blue to a number of different shades, depending on how much blue, how much burnt sienna. And so I've got this mixture going now. Before I put it on, now this is where I want to do a little bit of wet and wet. I want the background to be wet, so I'm going to get my big old 3/4 inch flat here, and I'm going to put some clear water on this around the perimeter where these flowers are, or where this flower is, and just wet it down so that we have some right about the edge of these petals. I want this to sort of stop at the edge of the petals. I don't want to run this water into the red area. I'm just sort of outlining the top now of this petal, if you can see that, hopefully, with just clear water. And up here, we're just going to put in some water. This is sort of going to be leave some dry edge out here at the top, but I want to make this kind of look like a little bit like a vignette where the colors just sort of explode out from the center. And we have this beautiful looking rose here in the middle. And by putting this water on here, we're going to get these interesting shapes that are soft, hard in some areas. And okay, so that's a little bit of that color. Let's take now a little bit of our blue, and we'll start up here on the upper left side, and we're just going to start putting in some things that look like this. Very, very impressionistic. Just pushing the brush in like this. Might pick up a little Payne's Gray to get a little darker color in there. And we'll move it down in this area. Around here, we want this, as we touch tops of this petal, the dry paper will keep it from running into the red, and that's what we want. That's the sort of the idea, to outline the tips of this. Again, we're just sort of flicking this in, scumbling with the brush is one way to describe it. So these are going to look like different kinds of, I don't know, leaves, something in the background here. And as we come down, now we want to start adding in some greens. So I'm going to pick up some of this yellows I got over here. There's 2 or 3 yellows. I'm going to add a little bit of my ultramarine into that and see what kind of greens we can get. So we'll start over here while this is still wet and start touching in some greens. It's going from, have some green up here maybe. Start changing this from blue to green by adding yellow. Start showing in there maybe some greenery in here. Not being very careful, just sort of laying in things that look like they might be some of the leaves and so forth in the background. So these are just sort of an explosion of color flicking out. These could be leaves. We're going to do more on this, but you see that's starting to look like a rose. It has a interesting outline here. Trying to keep this from looking too rectangular, but we want to have these colors all sort of mixed. I don't want it to be a rectangle. I want to have a nice abstract shape on the outer perimeter. Up here, while that paper is still a little wet, maybe I'll throw in another little something pink that looks like there might be another rose laying out here. I'm not going to paint a rose. I'm just going to put some color in it that may make you think there's a rose there. That's all there is to it. Something like that. Okay, now that needs a little time to dry. So let's go back and see if we can touch in some darker colors now in the inside of this rose here. See if we can identify maybe a little more of the petals. They do provide some little. Now that paper is really dry on the inside, while this is drying on the outside. I'm still using number 8 round. So I've really only used this number 8 round for all this paint. I used the number 3, the 3/4 inch flat to put water, clear water on this perimeter, but this is all we're doing here. So we have some interesting shapes, tops of petals here. And as we darken it, we'll get a little more orange and some colors in here. This is shadowed under here. I'm going to put a big stem coming down here. I've about lost my drawing, but there's a stem that comes under here. Whoops, I didn't mean to put that there. But we'll leave it there anyway. We have a dark green stem that comes out at the bottom here, right in this area. And make it dark. Like this. Something like that. Still a little bit wet in here, but we'll be able to put in some petals. Something like this. Might be some other types of leaves and things hanging underneath. That's more we can identify these, highlight these areas, we end up with makes it stand out. Basically just makes it pop out of the paper. Which is the idea here. Over here, let's darken some of this. Put a few more things that look like leaves. Up here, we want to put in some more darks. We're not trying to paint every leaf and every stem, but we're trying to give this impressionistic look that we have. This is sort of setting in a bouquet that has other roses maybe sitting in here that all have leaves of some sort. Okay, we're starting to get something that looks a little more finished. Around here, let's connect this together and put in some leaves, some stems, type of thing. We might even come in while some of this is wet and maybe scrape in a few things that look like they might be leaves up here. I'm getting a little buckling in my paper, which is not great, but okay. This stem down here needs to be darkened a little bit. So it looks like this rose is just sort of exploding right out of the paper. I'll get a little bit of this gray, slight gray, and touch in just a few shadows in here in some areas that may be a little darker. That's a little bit too dark. Let me lighten that up a little bit. Just put a little tone on them so that they don't have so much stark white sticking out. And we can come back and put in some of this orange and let this sort of blend together. Something like this is what I'm trying to get across. Okay, a little bit of the greens here, maybe a little bit darker green on this side. Put some in here. So just laying a petal like that. Just use the tip of the brush and just okay. Just about got this thing finished. Let me zoom back just a little on this one so you can see the full top. I didn't realize I didn't have all of that showing, but you did see the detail of me putting it in. Pretty much just a few things here to cover some of the whites. Okay. See how that looks. Step back and take a look and see if that looks like a rose in the middle of a little bouquet with a hint of a second rose on the top. That is pretty much all I want to do for that. I think that's a nice little exercise. And zoom back and hopefully you can give this a try. And if you're in my watercolor class, I know you'll give it a try because that's what we're going to do in the class as one of the exercises. So hope you like this painting and keep watching, keep tuning in. I'll keep putting videos out here and teach you everything I can. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. So long. Okay, we are finishing the sketch here, not the sketch, but the tracing of the barn and my tree and fence. What we've got going here is a tracing again over tracing paper, carbon graphite paper it's called. And I've completed the tracing of this little painting we're going to do as a next exercise. And excuse me, first thing we do after we get the tracing completed is we take off the tracing itself, and then we remove the graphite paper. Maybe. There we go. Okay, so then we have on our watercolor paper, we have the tracing of our picture we're going to paint. So this is another of the exercises we're going to be doing in our class, and watercolor class coming up in the end of July. So I want to take you through this one, and this is a fairly simple scene, but it's It's got a lot of color in it, and we've got a lot of interesting textures we try to create. We're using the same paints, the same brushes as usual. On this painting, I'm going to start with the sky. I'm going to wet the sky as usual, but I'm only going to wet it, part of it, so that I can get the sky with the clouds in. So I'm going to just put clear water. I'm using this 3/4 inch flat brush. And I'm going to wet it down to about the horizon here. And I'm going to have some over here. Yeah. Okay, something like this here. Just get it good and wet. Let it soak for a minute or two. And we're going to put a simple little sky in here, kind of between the trees, behind the trees. My brush has a little paint in it, looks like, so I'm going to use my cobalt blue and see if I can get some nice colors here in the sky. Just a bit here. Let's see. Okay. That's viewable by everyone, so let's get going here. Cobalt blue. And let's just pull a bit up here in the corner. Leave some room for clouds. Like this. Take a little more. Put some over here. Something fairly simple. We don't need a lot, but add just a touch of alizarin down here to sort of purple it up a little bit. That's a little too much, but we'll lighten it up by just clear water. So we've got some clouds forming. We've got a little haze in the, so I paint it right down to the horizon there, so you can see the water puddling here where the paper's dry. And hopefully I'll get it before it runs. And clean this up over here. Touch it here, pick up a little. Okay. All right, you can also make clouds with a paper towel. I've never shown you that, but you can by just touching into some of these areas and blotting out a little bit of this area, and it makes an interesting cloud. Gives a little, some soft and some hard edges. That'll work. Okay, so there's the sky. We have it finished. Not much more to do. We'll just leave that alone. And we'll start working on the next section here. Let's look at the sort of this background or middle ground here is sort of an ochre. It has a couple of yellow colors. I'm going to pick up some of my yellows here. I'm going to pick up my golden yellow, and I'm going to pick up some of this cad yellow, a little bit more orange in the cad yellow, and I'm going to throw a little bit of yellow ochre in there as well. Give me a little more earth color. So I'll put it over here. So just 2 or 3 colors of yellow. You see this ochre has a little bit more earth color in it, a little brown. So I'm going to start here and just put in some of this color above the barn. This area right here. Around the trees, pick up some other brighter yellow. So this is just a farm field of some sort back here with nothing much happening, but we want to give it some color. Put a little my burnt sienna in there, come back over here and touch a little bit in. Right down this side of this barn here, roof. So I'm painting negatively around the trees. Right in here we'll have some. I'm going to just sort of cover this whole area because I'm going to put a fence on top of it, but I'm going to just cover it right now to have it colored in with some color. There's the edge of that. So basically painting around these objects with this big 3/4 inch flat brush. Might have a little more back here. This area. Change the color. Don't keep it the same. It's a little too much burnt sienna. So let's just take a little out. A bit in here. Flat brush. And over here. Okay. So we're basically painting in the background behind this tree. Over here and behind the fence. We'll put that fence in over it, which will darken it up. It'll be darker color with that fence, and we'll have it done. Okay, that is most of the background, or middle ground, I should say. It's middle ground. Let's see if we can change the color a little bit and put maybe a little bit of green as we start coming forward here. Where's the green? Here we're starting to get a little bit of green. So I'm just touching this brush here. More yellow, more ochre. Still using the big old 3/4 inch brush. Use the biggest brush you can use for as long as you can. And all of this is going to be sort of this grassy color, I guess you want to call it. And as we put more colors on top, we'll, since this is transparent, we'll be able to paint right over this and get another whole shade of earth color here. Putting a lot of this in, mix it up a little bit, put a few greens in there maybe. We're going to have some dark brown on this road. Okay, so that's that part of it. Let's put a little bit on the other side of this tree. Mixing up more ochre, cad yellow, ochre, cad yellow. Over here, let's put some things like this. Change the color. Don't leave it all the same. Come back, get maybe a touch of a little blue in there to get some green. Okay, so very, very quickly here, we've got a good piece of this paper covered. This is a 9.5 by 12 watercolor paper, cold pressed, same as I've been using before. And so I've pretty much got the background sky with some clouds in it, from the middle ground with the land behind the barn, behind the tree, behind the fence, and a little bit of the foreground in. So now we'll just use our colors to paint in this tree behind the barn. And I'm going to do this all again. This will be wet and dry. On dry, I'm going to get my big round brush, this number 12 round brush. I'm going to mix up a little of greens. I'm going to use some Hooker's green, maybe a little of the Stalo green, blue shade. Put a little blue in it to darken it up, a little more cobalt blue. Hooker's green, cobalt blue, and we're going to just put in this pine tree that looks like it stands behind this barn here. Number 12 brush, great big brush. And I'm doing it on the side. I'm laying it on its side and just pushing. Some more dark in there. Maybe put a little Payne's gray in to darken it up in some areas, but just push it. Come down this side of this roof like that. touch in some other colors. Like this. Underneath, down. Okay. So much for that. That's about all I want that to look like there. Okay, I've got a few little spots that stick out, maybe some branches in there, but you can always darken it up, put a little more of the Payne's gray, or get some phthalo blue and put some dark spots in there to sort of give it a little more texture, so that it looks like there's some depth. 2 or 3 values and something like that makes it look like there's some depth, which you want with a tree like that. Okay, that's that tree. Let's look at this other tree over here. Maybe we can start on it. It has sort of a light yellowish green canopy on it. Take a little of my yellows that I already had mixed here and touch a few of these blues in it and see if I can get some new green colors. But I want this to be yellow green at the top. I'm trying to get some of this lemon yellow here. And again, wet on dry, big brush, number 12 round. And we're going to start at the top, and I'm going to just scumble in some of these things at the top, laying it on the side, push, push, push. Let it pull the paint out as it will. Leave some holes for the sky to show through. Oops. Something like this. As we come down, we're going to start picking up more green, a little more darks in here, so we'll throw in some greens. Again, just scumble. Scumble is using the brush, side of the brush, and just pushing and letting paint come off. Whatever paint will come off, comes off. And makes a very nice looking edge on these types of trees. Get a lot of water in there, maybe too much. Push them over here. So I'm just using this side of this brush and just sort of scumbling in these things that look like leaves hanging down this bright sunshiny day. Over here we got some. Okay, that's a good start. We can always come back and darken that up. Try to get 2 or 3 colors in here if I can. By just flicking out, we get these nice looking branch-like things. Touch, pull. Something like that. Okay, that's a pretty good start for that tree. More darks in there and some spots. Use some holes for the sky to show through. I'm going to run this off the top of the paper up here, so it doesn't look like we're force fitting a tree to fit into our frame. Okay, that's a good chunk of that done. Now this tree itself, we might as well work on it. I'm going to see, I think I want my number 8 round brush. On this tree, I'm going to put in some clear water and kind of on the right side of it, and just leave ourselves some areas here that are wet. This will help give this tree some roundness. When we put some paint on here, as we put the paint in, we can let it sort of bleed into this area that's slightly wet, and it will make those branches look round. I'll show you what I mean in just a second. Okay, so we got that. Let's pick up some burnt sienna and a little bit of Payne's gray to get a color, maybe a little bit of blue to get a gray. So we got 2 or 3 colors of blue and gray here. Blue. The tree has a couple of shades in it. So let's start with this round brush. And as we started here, you just push out, and as you see the area of the paint that's touching that water, you see the nice soft, how it's blending, soft edge over there. Change the color, come down here, push it off like this. Something like that. Take a little more and run it up the side here. Maybe even put a little. Nope, don't want that color. I want this color. Sometimes these trees take on a little cooler color, maybe a little purple color up in here like this. It's drying out. I can tell it's getting too dry. Up in here like this. Okay, so we're just drawing in some of these branches. And if it needs to be softened up, we always take a damp brush and just sort of soften it off a little bit. Put some other pieces in here like this. Okay, we got a little texture in there. It needs. We'll come back and touch it up. I can use some more texture, but we'll do that in a minute. So we've got some nice coloration going on here. Some soft edges, some hard edges, and we'll touch it up in a minute with some other colors. I want this to. It connects right here, so we don't have a, looks like 2 different trees. We don't have to be the one color flowing into the other. Okay. All right, so yeah, let's get our 1/2-inch flat brush. We're using a lot of different brushes here. We're going to work on this barn, the barn roof. We'll let this dry over here for a little bit, and we're going to work on the barn and the barn roof. I want this lavender color, sort of a lavender color, I guess you'd call it, for the roof of the barn. We'll probably have 2 or 3 shades of this. Some with a little more blue, some with a little more pink, but let's take the 1/2-inch flat, and we're going to start right here. We're just going to start putting on the roof of this barn. Make a little graded wash. It gets lighter at the bottom. Soften it up. Change the color, get a little more red in it, bring it up here. It doesn't have as much red as I would like. So we'll do this. Get some clear water and come back and sort of soften some of these edges. So it looks like it's all part of the same thing here. Something like that. As long as it's wet, it'll sort of blend together. Now get a little more darker color, put some more blue in it, a little less water, a little more paint, and we'll darken it up a little bit for the side. This side has to be a little bit darker. Here. So there's a shadow coming down here. over this area. And we'll run it out to about here. Clear water. And just pull it down. Put that clear water on before you get that, before this dries, you'll have a nice blended wash, a graded wash. We do have the sun coming from this side like this, so the right side of the tree is lighter, the front side of this barn should be lighter, this side of the barn should be a little darker, so you can see how I've got a little darker at the top with a little lighter at the bottom. It gives a indication there's a shadow from this eave overhanging here. Okay, not too much more on that. Let's try the front of the barn. It's going to be similar in color, but it's going to be lighter because the sun's shining on it. So let's see what we can do with it. Is that lighter? Not much. A little bit, but we'll leave some, put some clear water on it, over it, pull it down, and now it's getting lighter. Over here, we want some of the side of the barn. Maybe pick a little of the warm color up here as we come down. Sometimes the reflection of the sun off of the ground will lighten this up. It'll warm up the bottom of these here. So you have sometimes a warm color going into a cool color. So I'm just putting a little yellow in there to sort of show that. This side over here, the side over this door has a, maybe you got some browns in there. Lighten it up. More water. Blend it down. We'll come back over that and put some marks, some shadows, and bring that door out in a minute. But right now we just have the side and the roof finished. The eave, the big overhanging eave, needs to have some cool in it at the top. So I'm going to get a little more cobalt blue with this lavender and see if I can come in here and put in this eave. Darker at the top, a little darker at the top, more blue. Let it run down. Let it join. Then I'm going to come back and pick up a little of this ochre color and do the same thing from the bottom. Have a little warmth from the bottom up. Just blend them together. These things tend to pick up the color, and it makes a nice cool to warm, warm to cool blend back there by just letting those mingle together. Okay, what else can we do here? It's getting dry, so I'm going to put a little more darkness under here. There's a slight board that goes across there. Leave some of this out. Down the front of the eave, there's a little grayness. See if I can get a light gray color here, like here. And I don't want to paint the whole thing in, but I'm just going to hit it sort of to tone it down so it's not all white paper. And we'll just leave it look like that. The other side of that eave has a similar darkness over here. Let's separate it a little bit from the background so it doesn't stand out, or doesn't merge with the background. I want it to stand out from the background. Let's see, maybe just a little darker here in some spots. Okay, and inside we have this have a few little boards that look like this. We have a little window up here that's kind of sticking out like that. Okay. Our little brown of this over here, just burnt sienna right there. Sort of like a track for this door to run on. There's a door that's hanging down here that is sort of nondescript, not too plain, but I want it to stand out a little bit from the rest of the... Now, inside this little, one of the focal points is going to be this really dark area inside this barn. So I'm going to get out my 1/4 inch flat. I'm going to make a real dark color. One of the darkest colors we can make on this palette of paints is alizarin crimson and our phthalo green. Those two, with a little bit of Payne's gray, make a very dark, almost black. I have an ivory black on here, but I'm not using it. I'm using this mixed color, alizarin crimson, phthalo green, and a little bit of Payne's gray with a 1/4 inch flat. And in here we're going to put in something fairly dark, like right here, and under this window. And let it touch the dirt in the bottom here. And across there we're going to just put in the indication of a couple of window panes back there. On this door we have a little bit of... Okay, and now inside there, all that mixture, as it's drying, I want to come in there with my scraper with this plastic palette knife. You could also use a razor blade or a pocket knife. But in here, while it's still just a little wet, I want to put in a few marks to make it look like we've got some beams in there. Something that shows up a little bit. It gives us some added interest to that area. And again, if the paint's too wet, which in this case it was a little bit too wet, but it will scrape it, it will turn black, make a darker mark. If the paint is just right, I will scrape it out and leave a white mark, which maybe you can see there. And if it's too dry, it won't do anything. I'm using this 1/4 inch flat again. I'm going to come back in this barn area here. I picked up a little of this purple or lavender color I have. I'm just going to make some indications of some boards, a little shadow to sort of outline this door. There's a door over here that actually has two halves to it. And that's good enough for that. I'm going to put a couple little marks in here. Highlight this a little bit. This is kind of fine detail that I'm getting into right now, but I need to make sure I get that done and don't forget it. So I'll put this stuff in here now, get rid of some of these whites. A little more of this dark in here. There. Helps define these angles a little bit, so you can really tell the roof of that barn. Okay, so we got the sun shining here. We got this barn pretty well finished. Tree is almost finished, although there's some more work we can do there on that tree. If I get my 1/2 inch flat, I'm going to bring it back and get some more of this burnt sienna and see if I can just add a little texture. One of the ways you can paint bark is to, if you don't have rough texture, you can always take the brush and just sort of touch it, very lightly touch it. And you'll create some textures with a brush that's not real wet, but by just touching here and there, you can create some effects that look like bark. Blend them together, change the color. You notice these are different colors. Abstract shapes, make them so they look like they're rounded and part of on the surface of this. So it's giving a little more texture to that tree, to those branches. All right. Makes it stand out a little more. There's a little shadow over here. Actually, it's a little darker. Okay. All right. We have, before I finish with the round brush, I want to put more greens, a few more green bushes here in the around this barn. Pick up some green here. Can bring it down a little bit. Right in here, we're going to have a few more bush-like things sort of sticking along the bottom of this barn. Something like that along in here, and there's some weeds and grasses and stuff that sort of grow here. It's where the lawnmower doesn't cut when you're cutting the grass. You don't get up close to something there. Leaves a few of those kinds of things hanging out. Okay, that's good enough for that. We will have some more grasses over here. Maybe I'll put a few in over here just to bring that color back so we don't have it in one place on the painting. And just rough brush it in like this. Rough brush. All right, ready for that little fence back there. I think I'm going to use my half inch flat and get some of this brown that I used on the tree and a little bit of the lavender that I used to make the colors of these posts. Okay, and we'll start here. Going across, that's the wrong color. Oh, brown, brown, brown. Amazing. Do all that mixing and end up with the wrong color. Vertical post here, sticks up slightly. Horizontal beam. Here we have a half post that is really supporting this taller post that's over by a gate. Many ranches and horse farms and stuff, you'll see this type of gate where there's one tall post and another post next to it that's basically helping support it to keep it from pulling out of the ground. Like this. Here we go. Second post here. More like this. Right behind this tree. And they pop out over here on the other side of the tree. These don't have to be too perfect. They should actually start fading out a little bit into the, so they're not quite as prominent on this side. Okay, that's enough for that little fence. You see how the tree looks. I think I want to put a few more branches in there. When I got this brush going, I'm going to come back and pick up a little of this green. See if I can sort of kind of add something to the bottom of these so it looks like they're really attached to the ground instead of just glued on. So we'll have some bushes and some stuff here. Okay. All right, I'll help outline this driveway. Some over here to connect it so we don't have one color that doesn't connect. Okay. Something like this. All right, we've got room for our driveway. What else we need to do here? How about back in those trees? Let me get my number 8 round brush here and get some more of this green. Pick up some cad yellow. It's got some green in it over here. And see if I can get maybe a third darker color. It's going to give me a little more depth maybe in some spots. And that's not quite dark enough. Adding phthalo blue to this mixture to get a little more dark. So we can just kind of scumble some of this in as well. So make some dark leaves that are hanging in here in the shadows a little bit. So, not too much more than that. Let's just put a few more things in here. Okay, now the rest is just some fine details now, hopefully picking up some of the branches. And we'll use I'm going to get our fine rigger out. So we've used just about every brush in our repertoire here today. Both big rounds, number 8, number 12. We've used all 3 flats, the 3/4, the half, and the 1/4 inch flat. And by getting out this number 4 rigger, we will be putting in some fine branches. So I'm going to get this sort of a gray color going here for these branches, gray, brownish gray. And I'm going to come back here now and just start putting in some additional branches that sort of stick up here like this. These trees sort of have this, they've got leaves on them, but they still have a lot of branches kind of sticking out into the sky, which is what we're trying to show here. Some are on top of the greenery, some are embedded in it. They're hard to see, so you want to make those come out. I want to make some of these sort of come out over this barn as well. So we have this sort of a, wherever we can connect these and make it overlap, it's going to make it very interesting. Something like that. Put some up in here. Hide a few, stick a few out. Try to make these spaces so they're not identical and they have something sticking out. Okay, that's some just fine tuning there. Put a few more darks on this bottom side. I think this needs to be a little darker to help make it look more rounded. Even here we can use some dark to show that it's a little rounded. Blend it with clear water like this. All right. The thing we haven't done is our road. Let's see if we can get some browns and colors in here for this road. Put it in fast and furious. We just got the 1/2 inch flat here, and I'm just going to sort of swoop it in like this. Something like that. Make it sort of point over here. Like this. A few darks in some spots, lights in some spots. Okay, and that leaves us with some tire tracks or whatever here that make it look like there's something been driving up here. The other thing I want to do before I forget is to put in a few shadows of these trees. This tree has is casting a shadow over this area because the sun is coming from the right. Therefore, we will try to show that here in this area. If the sun's coming like this, the trunk of this tree is probably, I want that to be more purple, more blue. The trunk of this tree is probably something like this. Something like that, maybe. And it actually comes back over the road even. Come over the road and touch into here. Yeah, okay, so we're starting to get the effect of this big old tree that's casting a big shadow. Like that. How's that looking from the camera view? Okay, that's getting some interesting shapes in there. That's about all we need to do, I think. Make sure this road stands out. Put a few more darks in here. This rough texture gives it. If you put marks through a shadow, it always helps the shadow stand out. It's a little too much dark, but hey, we can always fix this stuff. All right, and sort of one last thing that a lot of artists will do is take some color, get a lot of water and color on your brush, and sort of lay in some splattering. Splattering is always fun. If you get enough water on it, you can really throw a lot of paint. So I'm going to try it this way and see what happens here. I didn't get enough water on it. Using this rigger. Something like that. Get a little more paint. Okay. Maybe just a couple of green, dark, grassy areas that kind of sit around the bottom of this tree over here. Something like that. Maybe there's a little bit over here. I don't know. Okay, so put a little touch of that back here so we don't have it just in one spot. There's some shadows back here that we need to reinforce. Okay, I think I'm going to call that finished. And we'll be painting this in our workshop this month. And I hope you like it. I hope you're able to try this painting and keep having fun. Until I see you again, I'll call this painting finished and see you soon. Goodbye. Hello again, I'm Larry Hamilton and welcome to my painting channel. Thank you for watching. Today I'm going to do another in the series of little sample paintings that are being used in our watercolor workshop that's coming up at the end of July. This is the last one I'll be doing. It's a scene of a sort of a waterfront, I guess you'd call it, little dock scene, and I have a template here that I've been sketching from. You can see here, so many people have trouble with sketching that I've tried to simplify it in this class and provide templates for everyone in the class to use. So we start with a template like this, and you've seen me use this on a couple other videos, and we put the template over graphite paper, and we put the graphite paper over our watercolor paper, and we trace it, so it minimizes the need to learn how to sketch if you don't know how to sketch. So I have this pretty well done, so I take off the template sketch and I remove the graphite paper, and I have left on my watercolor paper a sketch that's ready to go. I hope you can see that. So we're going to finish this little watercolor scene, and this is actually a take-home exercise at the end of the class that people can do. And I thought I would go through it just to give another chance to show people how to paint certain types of watercolor techniques. So let's get going. I'm going to take my standard brushes that we use, the 3 flats, the 4 rounds, and the same paints, the 16 paints that we have in our palette. And we will start on this painting. It's sort of a gray day in this particular scene. I'm going to wet the paper with this 3/4 inch flat brush, clear water, and I'm just wetting it down to the top of this building roof here, and over this way I'm going to leave this all for sky. This will sort of be a vignette. It's probably not going to cover the whole paper, but we will cover as much as we need to tell the story. So let's paint the clear water on here around this building. This is our sky area, and I'll bring it right down to the horizon. We have a big piling here that you could tie your boat up to if you had a boat in this little harbor. This is really called moving water. We're going to show the motion of water moving, what it looks like when it puts some reflections on it. So this is a good test to show the moving water as opposed to still water, which was one of the other exercises we did. Okay, so we're going to take some grays. We've got a little Payne's gray here. I'm going to add maybe a little blue with it, a little of our ultra blue. And I'm going to get a sky color that has some gray in it and some to get a good gray, one thing you can use is burnt sienna with Payne's gray. I'm sorry, burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. And sometimes I add a little Payne's gray to make it a little grayer. And these colors do lighten up as they dry, and particularly if you put them on with water on the paper, they will lighten up. So I'm going to just sketch in a little rough sky here that sort of looks like it might be a little rainy or something like that, but just taper it down to the horizon here. Graded wash. And over here, we'll probably put a little bit over here that's going to blend and soften off. Over the top of this building here, we want some gray. And that pretty much does the sky. We don't need a whole lot more than that. And then around here, we're going to paint these pilings. I just want that roof to remain light, and back in here there's probably a few spots where the sky might show through, but other than that we don't need too much more. Maybe a streak or two in the sky, show some cloud movement or whatever. But that is a gray sky that you might see on a seacoast somewhere where a little dock like this might exist. Take a little lighter shade, and while the paper down here is dry, we're going to put in some a little bit lighter colors. We'll start with the grays at the back and kind of move it forward. It's a little bit too gray maybe. Put a little water in it, lighten it up. Leave a little room back here in the back for like water glistening across like this. And as it comes forward, we're going to make it just a little bit darker and add a little more brown to it, actually. But we want to leave some streaks in here. This is going to be a very fast painting. As it comes forward, it starts picking up more of the ground, or the should say the sand underneath if you're getting close to the edge here. And we'll just brown it up a little bit. Usually water gets a little darker as it comes forward. That might be a little too much, but we can always lighten it up by throwing more water on it. So I'm using a 3/4 inch flat to do most of this so far, putting on the clear water and then coming back and just putting in this darker colors in the foreground. So we have a sort of a grayish sky. We have a little bit of light here in the back with some rough textures in it, and we have gets a little darker as it comes forward, as you can start seeing the bank here. Pull some lines through it like this, help maybe lift out some water, lift out some paint while it's still wet, if we can. Let's see, try it like this. Okay. Streaks will help identify this as water. Okay. That's the sky in the foreground. I mean, this is really, really quick. We'll spend a little time on the details in this building in the back, but primarily this is, get my camera a little straighter here maybe. See the full picture. I didn't align this properly. Get it just a little better here. There we go. Okay. Now, so it looks kind of all gray with a little burnt sienna at the bottom. I'm going to change brushes now, get away from this big 3/4 inch flat and go to my 1/2 inch and my 1/4 inch flats for this building in the background. It's got a lot of small marks that are best done with the flat brush. So this building has a lot of burnt sienna in it, so I'm going to make a pile of clear burnt sienna here without any color in it, any other color. And if I want to darken it up, I'll just pick up some of this darker with Payne's Gray in it that will darken it up a little bit, a little more ultramarine blue over here in this other well. Okay, let's start with just pulling in some clear, wet on dry now, using the 1/2 inch flat. And right up here, I'm going to start putting in pulling down some of this building that I'm going to paint around some things. I'm going to paint around some of these posts that maybe stick up like this. Change the color, get a little more dark in it so that it's not all one flat color. Mix it up a little bit. Here we go. Something like this. We have a little shed that kind of angles down like this over here. Something like that. Okay. Down below we have some more of this Payne's Gray. And this little dock comes out like this. We'll leave a little gap here just as a highlight. It'll kind of look like the walkway or something. Put in some vertical streaks here that look like pilings going down different angles. They're all going down into the change the color a little bit, get a little more darker in here, make a little more solid marks. As we come through here like this, we'll actually build this up with different colors, light in the bottom. Some places put a little, there's some rocks in this area. Leave that as that's wet. I want to come back and touch in a scrape in actually with either my knife or my palette knife or my razor blade. Scrape in a few things that look like pilings in there. Let me see if I can do it with the with this palette knife. Take it sideways and come right in here and scrape down like this. Gives us some vertical streaks that look like some posts that are in there. And so it lightens them up. It kind of pulls the paint out from the paper and leaves some light marks in there. Okay, I've got a little bit of a post that sticks up here. This one in front is really sort of taller than the rest. It sticks up like that. There's a couple little places here. So it makes an interesting series of lines and varied edges. And actually we had maybe scraped in some trees. Okay, well, let's put in some of the trees. We got some trees. I'm going to put a little yellow ochre in with this and make some trees over here on this side, like right in here. Maybe a little more brown than that, but just right in here there's some sort of a tree-like structure, a couple little trees. Kind of sit there like that. Get my smaller brush, my 1/4 inch, pull down some trunks. And I can fine tune that later. There's another little building over here. You see, like right in here. It's a building, has a little bit of a like that. I'll put a little side on it here. I'm going to leave that roof of that building open. Maybe just a few more things in here to tie it together, some other bushes, trees or whatever. Fairly nondescript, fairly impressionistic back there. Okay, that's kind of small. I hope you can see that. I probably could zoom in a little bit and let you have a closer look. I don't know if I'll lose my angle here on the camera, but let me pull it up a little bit and see if I can zoom in on that to give you some detail. So that's pretty much the look of that building back there. And keep it like this, and this painting is working fairly quickly. It's not going to take us a long time to do this. Let me get another paper towel and start filling in some of these places that have a little too much white paper. I'm going to come back and just sort of gray out some of this. Way too much color here, or too much white paper. And there, that helps a little bit. With that, at the bottom I want some more of this, pick up a little more of this yellowish, yellow ochre. Down here we have some bushes, or maybe grasses or something like that, just sort of at the bottom here. Tie that color in with what's above it. Below that, we might have a little bit of dark places out here where the water meets the bank. I'll just put in some horizontal lines to kind of connect it together. Here, like this. Ties these. We want to put these down in the water so they actually look like they're sitting in the water instead of glued on. We didn't glue them on. And we have a couple of spots up here that have, there's a couple little windows back in here. This building has a couple of spots like that. Little one over here. Finish off this little angle up here. This is another building attached to it. So, okay, just a few things to sort of make sure we know what we're looking at here, that there's not confusion for the viewer, hopefully. All right. And this painting really should probably be cut off right about here, so that runs off the edge of the page. I wouldn't run that out. I'd have to put a lot more structure over here to actually connect it to the water. It almost looks like an island right now. Let's go in and get some more dark, and I want to put in this pillar here, this post or pylon, you might call it. This particular item here is really a dark set of posts sitting in the ground to tie your boat up. Change the color, lighten it up, pull some clear water in there to sort of lighten this up. It runs down like this into the water, and it runs down from here up. And it has another little piece that sticks out back here. Change the color a little bit. Don't want it to look identical. Maybe you can see that color change back there, hopefully. Okay, so that's just a rough post sitting out here in the middle of this water. And it looks like it's glued on right now. There's another little post over here, sort of sitting in the water at an angle. Something like that. And these things are going to have reflections, so they're going to have some reflections here at the bottom. We're going to start putting in some darkness that actually looks like we have some reflection. Maybe I'll use maybe this other flat. This half-inch flat's probably the better size for that. And this particular one comes down. Actually, I think I want to wet this just a little. Paper's lost a lot of its water. A lot of it's dried out, and I want to have some wetness here, like this. A little bit coming out like this, and maybe some here. So that's just enough to give me a little bit of soft edge in some of these areas where I put this paint down. Pull it down. Just these vertical streaks that sort of make this look like it's in the water and it's reflecting. Goes like this, and the other one sort of comes over here like this, has a bit of an angle to it to match this angle. Something like that. Little squiggles in there to sort of make it look like it's not just. And then down here we actually put in a lot more dark. This whole area here gets a big dark treatment going down this way. So we're having interesting darks in here. through here you want to use a thirsty brush, clean out your brush, dry it out, and then sort of go through here and pick up paint. And that basically helps tell the story that this is a reflection. Didn't want to do that, but I'll take it out of there with some clear water. And we're showing some nice reflections. Over here around this post, there's some interesting reflections coming out from it as well. And here, let's put a few more marks to sort of thin it out. Actually, the original of this really went all the way down to the bottom of the paper. Big reflection. Something like that. So we know where the water line is. This is the water line where these things are reflecting down into the water. And all of this is just reflection of this post in the water. So we're going to have some streakiness in here like this. It's going to help show more movement. This water looks like it is moving a little bit. Use my rigger. There's a couple of lines and things in here. Actually, the thing I left out back in the background was looks like a telephone pole that was sort of setting right about here. Goes up like this. I'm just touching this flat brush. Goes up about like that, and then has a little cross part on it that looks like that. There's another one over here that was sort of sticking up with a little cross beam on it like that. All right. Excuse me. Then there was this rigger. I'm going to just use some of these browns that we got in here. Fairly simple palette, and just sort of tie in. There were some ropes around here that we sort of want to make them go out here and touch this guy. Maybe another one here that comes over and wraps around this post. There are a couple of them up here that sort of go down in the building like this. There's even a couple that go from here that take off and go over this way. And some other little vertical things and whatever to sort of make a interesting scene out of this. Thinking maybe I can scrape out just a little. If I take some clear water in my rigger here, and in this area here, I'm going to just try to see if I can scrape out a couple of, scrape them out or blot them out, see if that works. Makes it look like there's some rope up there. Things tied around. Okay. That's a fairly simple scene. We've only spent 25 minutes on it, but it has some drama. It has a big object in the foreground that gives you some drama. It shows like the water's moving. And I think that's about all we want to do. I might put in another few squiggly lines here to sort of represent water movement here between this guy. Something like this. These little things show the water shimmering. Maybe a few streaks over here like this. So that water definitely looks like it's moving, and that's what we're trying to show. This is called moving water, and just a very simple scene, and hopefully you've had fun painting this. It's certainly something that I'll hand out for homework at the end of our class, and if you get a chance to do it, give it a try. This will be the last of the workshop exercises that I'll be videotaping. I'll be having some more watercolor paintings and more oil paintings coming up. But hope you like this, and I hope you keep subscribing and watching my videos. I'll keep putting them out there. Again, Larry Hamilton here. Thank you for watching, and we'll say goodbye for now. So long.